Hey everyone, and welcome to People of Substance by LemonSkies. I am thrilled to welcome Michelle Flores Vryn, who is my guest today. We've been trying to arrange this for some time, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here. Please say hi to everyone.
Oh, it's so good to be here. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
There's so many things I want to ask you, but I'm going to start with an easy one. Why fundraising? Why nonprofit space? How did you land where you are today?
Yeah. So I always try to tell a little more of the story because I think so many of us as fundraisers, we just end up saying, I just fell into fundraising, which I could say, but I'll give you a little more color to the story. And I originally thought I was going to become a cultural anthropologist, and I was going to go through my doctoral program and be a cultural anthropologist that studied specifically what made global conservation projects succeed or what made them not succeed. What were the common elements like in the architecture of those conservation projects?
Mm-hmm.
And I was in graduate school and I had enough credits to get my master's, and I really took a hard pause moment and asked myself, like, do I want to keep going for my PhD? And I think some of my hesitation around it was, one, it was like a lot of work, but two, I felt like other people who were pursuing a dissertation and doing the teaching and the academia role, they didn't seem that happy. And I could pick up on that, even after a couple of years. It's like, oh wow, these people, don't seem thrilled with the way their day-to-day is going. And I was having a little bit of uncertainty around, am I going to be able to make the conservation impact that I want to make in academia? Because I actually love to learn. I love academia, but there's this statistic which is kind of harrowing, that the average peer-reviewed article is only viewed by 10 people on average. And you have like some real bangers, right? Like some articles that are just like on the cover of Science magazine and they're so popular, but on average, there's not a lot of people reading your work. And that also, I think, chipped away at my soul a little bit. And I really wanted to work in conservation. At the time, I realized and discovered, kind of unearthed this rock of nonprofits doing conservation work. And it kind of blew my mind. You had like these small nonprofits who were leading community gardens, water conservation projects, you name it, right? Like they're facing with the community on a daily basis. And I just loved that. It felt so vibrant to me. And I think once I really learned about nonprofits, I don't think I ever could like look back, because the amount of impact they have and that it's community facing really drew me in.
So with this peer review, I have to wonder if 10 readers includes like your parents or your partner.
And you looking at like your own your own words. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, PhD is a lot of work. I mean, the plus side, people have to call you doctor.
yes.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I feel like I'm still doing elements of it in terms of teaching. I love to teach. I still do a lot of presentations. So I'm still doing those things, but um, not necessarily in a university environment.
In the more hands-on way. So let me ask you this. You started alluding to some of the trends and some of the bigger picture things that are happening in nonprofit space. And I've definitely heard you speak about artificial intelligence, and we're not talking about generative AI, Chat GPT, but in a broader sense. So I guess what are your observations? I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but where are we headed for nonprofits with the use of AI?
Yeah, so one thing to lay the backdrop here in is there's been a lot of survey research done at the beginning of this year and late last
Mhm.
year of how often are nonprofits actually using AI platforms. And the answer is not as much as our for profit peers, right? Which probably isn't shocking, but it's also not good because we're not getting in on the testing of these
Mhm.
platforms and learning ourselves and kind of figuring our way through it.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to be a trend of, we are going to be a couple of years behind other people. Hopefully we can change that, but right now that's what it's looking like. But to answer your larger question of like, where is this going for us as a sector? I mean, I do feel like it's going to help us with our capacity issues if we do it in the right way.
Yeah.
And I actually had a post about this today. I think I posted today. One of the things I really want us to do as nonprofit practitioners is to take a breath, ask the question of, like, what kind of work do we feel like is like that first layer of transitioning over to AI leveraged work? Like, what are we comfortable with? What are we uncomfortable with? Just having these debates and discussions internally on your teams. I want to see that happen so much more for us, because I
Yeah.
think we're missing that step. And oftentimes we're just, I mean, just to say it bluntly, I mean, I think we're really listening to a lot of the tech company advice
Mhm.
and advice from people who are not working in house on how we should be thinking about this technology, which, in fact, this is like one of the most democratized ways of us
Mhm.
thinking about our own power. And I hope we begin to see it that way. I do think right now, Olga, though, I see in nonprofits people testing things like in silos. So you have,
Yeah.
people in the accounting office and people in the development office and people in marketing kind of all doing their own little experiments. And love that for you. Like, keep doing it. But I would love for it to be a connected effort. So you're sharing, this is what I learned. And
Yeah.
here's like a free platform that I think you should use. That right now, I feel like is happening in a very siloed manner.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been trying to do is forming kind of cross-functional teams to have those conversations and have those discussions. But I think, two observations I've had. One is misunderstanding of AI is taking over, some fears about job security and things like that. It's like, well, not really. As the saying goes, it's not AI, it's the person using AI that you have to
Yeah.
worry about. But then also expecting something really big and dramatic as opposed to improving some of the daily processes and making it a little bit more efficient. So it's not like a flying car type of scale of change, but it's slight, gradual, daily things.
Totally. And I think, like, bit by bit, step by step, that will end up getting us really far. But to your point, it's not going to be like an overnight
Yeah.
change. Um, I'm optimistic, though. I mean, I think I'm definitely an optimist on it, which I am in general. So I guess it's
Mhm.
not
You are.
surprising. It's not surprising. But um, yeah, I don't know. I think also it when we think about AI, it invites us into like these deeper existential questions of, like, who do we want to be as a sector? How do we
Mhm.
want to transform? We're going to transform either way,
Yeah.
but why not be intentional about it?
Right. Well, and when people are saying, not to use AI, it's almost like, well, you use Google, right? Like once upon a time, you would never dream of doing your research on Google. So I think it's going to change. It's coming. You can embrace it or not embrace it, but it's coming.
Yeah,
Here.
agreed. And I will say, at conferences, we see more and more AI conversations and topics. So
Mhm.
that's good. But I still feel like there's early adopters like you and
Mhm.
I, and then like we're in the minority. Like, most people are not testing as much as we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's curiosity trying to kind of chase the next thing and staying ahead of it. So speaking of staying ahead, I want to talk about shift gears a little bit and talk about your other hat. So you're a nonprofit professional. We'll talk more about that in a second. But you also write, you participate in podcasts, you attend and speak on conferences. You produce a significant volume of content and solid content in our space. It's always original, it's always thoughtful. So I want to ask you about creativity and not just carving out the time, but kind of where does the juice come from?
Mm. I think for me, I've always considered myself to be a very creative person, and earlier in my career, I don't think I took full advantage of all the ideas that I had. I kind of just sat on them or lost them or didn't let them emerge for whatever reason. And I feel like there was this moment, I don't know if it was a moment, but a phase to where I kind of realized I had been doing that for too long.
Mhm.
Like I had ideas that weren't spoken in meetings and articles that were like in my head, but it never made it into reality. And in this phase, I think it began to bother me so much
Mhm.
that I just was like, why am I not being more vocal? And I realized like I needed some kind of practice, some kind of routine to help me get it out, it's
Mhm.
like to get it out of me. And writing is my primary way of doing that. So I write like in my journal just for personal notations. And I, of course, write on LinkedIn quite often. And writing is a way to help me think through things, like even AI things, like writing the articles or doing the presentations. I have to organize in my mind, well, what
Yeah.
do I really think about this? Like, what do I really think are the first steps for us? And what are we missing with AI? And it allows me to expand my own thoughts to kind of come to new conclusions that I otherwise would not be taking that path to. So I do make time for that. Um, I think a lot of it just has to do with making time for original thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
One way that I believe has helped me do this more than a consistent practice is through meditation. I'm a huge meditator. I've been meditating almost every day for over a decade. And I think it really changes the way you move throughout the
Mhm.
world. And that includes like the way you think.
Mhm.
So I'm really big on meditating on ideas and kind of coming up with things. And I do write them down. Like, so I
Yeah.
have a Google Doc that's just like a running list of just snippets of things. It's very rare that it's like a full fledged, like,
Yeah.
here are 5 steps for AI, like in the next year. Like, it's more of just little glimmers of something.
Mhm.
And then I notate it and I spend more time with it. And the more time I spend with it, the more it comes alive,
Yeah.
which I like. I like that process of like it becoming, like the idea kind of becoming. Um, so I think it's like a beautiful process, and I love being a part of it.
Well, and you hit on something. Sometimes it's not coming up with the idea, it's capturing the idea. I was actually legitimately Googling whiteboards that I can install in the shower because that's where you get your greatest
Yeah.
ideas. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
people always say like in the middle of the night or early in the morning. That happens to me. I will say I am not one who keeps the journal by their bed or the phone, and I
Sure.
probably should. Do you?
No, no.
I don't
I'm
either.
dead to the world when I'm asleep.
And I kind of like it that way.
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
want to be cut off from it sometimes.
Yeah. I just add notes in my phone when I can and when I remember, but definitely, you'll have that spark, that glimmer, and if you don't capture it within 20 minutes, it's gone. Like you don't remember what it was. It was really good, but I don't remember what it
Yeah.
was. So,
Yep.
with
And
the
I will
next
say, like
world.
I've kind of moved to say this. It's on topic, but a little tangential. One thing I've always thought so much about, because nonprofits, of course, we're professional problem solvers. We have all these problems that are so difficult and complex because nobody solved them yet, so they're not that easy to solve. And one thing I always think about when it comes to ideas is when we're sitting in meetings, virtual or in person, like, are there winning ideas, really great ideas in that room that just have not been
Mhm.
excavated or shared? I think about that so often. And this, I think, really comes to creating that psychologically safe environment to where people feel comfortable
Mhm.
sharing. Super important. But I do think oftentimes there is a solution in that room. It's just nobody's heard it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Teasing it out and, sometimes kind of making sure everybody at the table actually voices ideas. It's the quiet ones that sometimes they're sitting on brilliance without
Yes,
sharing it.
agreed.
So, speaking, you've talked about taking the time and meditating. So, it doesn't surprise me about you at all. But you did something really, really phenomenal recently. You took a personal sabbatical, which is brilliant. You took, was it 3 or 4 month off?
It was closer to 4.
Closer to 4. And where you were focusing, but also not focusing, kind of some unstructured time and just mapping out your next steps. So how did you arrive at this idea of taking a personal sabbatical, and what was the hardest thing about making it possible?
Well, I think the first piece of like how did I arrive there, I think I was just feeling disenchanted with work, and like I knew I was feeling that way, and I didn't really know quite how to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And that really bothers me as someone who I feel like I'm a very solutions oriented person, but not knowing what direction to move into to be a part of that solution, that bothers me. And I really like, I think in past years, I've loved fundraising. I've loved nonprofits. I love this sector. And I think I kind of show that in my content too. But I was getting to a point to where I just felt emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted. And I think I just needed time to recover. And I knew that I needed that. And I got to this intersection or this point to where I had to make a choice. Am I just going to keep feeling this way? Or am I going to say it's not okay to feel this way and I'm going to try to solve it?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, gosh, like if I don't do this now, like I'll never do it. Like I'm not, if I don't do it this year, like I'm just never going to do it. Like I have to just take the leap and just say, I need to take some time for myself. And it wasn't so much of like the role or the specifics. It was just more of as a person, as a human being, I was just kind of feeling tired and lost.
Yeah.
And so I decided like, I'm just going to take some time off. I'm going to really think about what I want to do next, because, in your job search, oftentimes you may know this isn't the right role, but that doesn't answer what is the right role.
Right.
So not knowing what's working is good, like thumbs up, but you also have to know where to go.
Yeah.
And that was the piece where I think I wanted to spend more time on. And for me, I think I've always been good about balancing a lot of things. I credit most of that to my meditation practice. And so it wasn't so much about like finding balance in my life. I think it was more of answering the question of who am I when I detach my value from work? Like, who is this person? If I'm not producing value through nonprofit work, like who am I really? And I knew that was like a really deep question to ask. And I think that I've gotten closer to answering it. I think it's like that's like a lifelong question, right? Like for those who are enlightened, maybe like Buddhist monks are very articulate in answering that. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but I think I did reacquaint myself with who I was outside of work. And we have multiple layers working against us here. I mean, I think as women, like we're always in like this helper phase, like we're trying to make things around us better or worse. And also as a nonprofit professional, you kind of double down on that identity. And then being in this American capitalist economy, it's like triple whammy, like, whoa, like this is like becomes everything I think about of myself is what I'm doing related to work. And while I like work and I like working in nonprofits, I know there's so much more to me than that. And so really sitting with that and finding time to think about those things was really healthy. And I hope that, as I move into a new position, I will bring that awareness with me now, like a newfound awareness. So I'm eager to see like how that changes and alters my experience in the workplace. But as the book says, everywhere you go, there you are. So I'm still going to be, taking some of my problems or issues into any role. But that's the point of being human, is having time to work on these things and to get better at them. So I definitely did that. To your question about like what was the hardest part, I mean, I think it's hard to sit still and feel like it's okay to not have anything to do right now. So that was a healing thing, but also a hard thing for me. And then also, like, I think just financially, I basically use my savings to do this, which I think was a great investment and I would do it again. But, you don't have the same amount of income coming in. So you can't do certain things you normally would do. Like, it's not like I was able to, rent an Airbnb in the mountains for 3 months. Like I
Right.
didn't have that kind of money. So that was a little bit challenging. I think like ideally it'd be great to have the funds to like put yourself in a whole new environment and not just be like at your house.
Mm-hmm.
But it still can be done at your house too, of course.
Well, and that's a really good point for somebody to realize you're not unusual, that you're, traveling the world and kind of living the life of leisure. Like you really very purposefully made this decision, knowing the pros and cons going in.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I do think like it would have been a whole different experience. Like I talked to someone who they took a sabbatical for half a year and like they went to this island, like this remote island. And I was like, wow, like our experiences were very different. But yeah, like that would have been a whole different kind of experience. But I think you can give yourself time no matter where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. So something you wrote recently, and you and I are connected, and I always enjoy, you have a fresh perspective and unexpected perspective. But you said something recently that really spoke to me. You expressed something that I felt oftentimes, but never quite put it into words. You said that you don't have to listen to every podcast, you don't have to read every newsletter, you don't have to read every nonprofit book that comes out. You don't have to read every article. It's okay to close the tabs.
Yeah.
And that was a very powerful thing as somebody who usually has 20 tabs open and marks things to read and consume.
Same.
To stay on top of it, just to kind of like pick and choose, right? Like you don't have to read it all. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that this deep down kind of goes back to our desire for perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're trying to learn all the things, figure out all the angles before we launch the annual campaign or write the Giving Tuesday email or whatever. Like consume as much as you possibly can. And then when it's like at this optimal state, then we're going to move forward, which in reality, like life just doesn't work like that. Like we don't ever really get to know everything. And I think the fact that we think that is something we should be striving for is a real problem. And you also know a lot. I think we don't give ourselves credit for everything we do know. And it's hard. It's hard like in today's world because you have so many things competing for your attention and you want to feel like you're up to date on everything. But again, I wrap that in a desire for perfectionism too. And I think if we look at it and label it like that for what it really is, then we can back away from it and say, yeah, I mean, I probably do know a lot and I'm not going to be perfect in the way I'm pushing out work or what I'm thinking and writing. So that was like my real goal for that. It was interesting. Somebody in the comments said, like we really know more than we think, but also when you think of like a lot of thought leaders and what they're putting out, it is really just the same content.
Yes.
Like it's very, very similar. And I think that's fine that it is. But I thought, yeah, like how many times can we say something in a different way? Like we've kind of heard it all, and I don't know. I think I'm still stewing on her comment because I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like that's interesting that we do know all of this stuff already,
Well, it's trusting your own ability to apply information, so you don't have to keep intaking it. It's applying it.
Yep.
And to your point about the originality and kind of thought leadership, and you certainly see some self-appointed thought leaders that are really just regurgitating. No one has time for that. If it's not original, like you're just repackaging same old, I'm not as excited about that.
100% agree. And I know like I've seen those people too. And, I think too, like one thing that I said in this post is we don't realize how cognitively heavy or like the heaviness of the cognitive load is by trying to do all of these things. Like if we just whittled it down and focused on something that was truly important to us, we would get more done than splitting our energies between all of these different things. And I just wanted to remind people of that too, because I forget that. Like I have a lot of tabs open at once, and I have to remind myself of like, what is the most important tab? Like pick 3 out of the 25, pick 3. Those are going to be your ones you explore more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful to have you as a guest. I know you have some exciting announcements coming up in the next few days, so people can be in suspense until it comes out. But talking to you is definitely very grounding. That's the word they keep coming back to. It's okay not to be perfect. So you've been a wonderful guest, and I hope listeners take that away as well, just a sense of grounding and a little bit of peace.
Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, if I could give you those things, I will feel like a very successful guest. So thank you for
Your
having me.
good deed for the day is completed. Thanks for being here.